Welcome to the only place where real, raw, and vulnerable conversations happen with IFBB bikini pros to give you an inside look at their struggles, strategies, mindset, passions, and all of life beyond the stage. This podcast is made to inspire, motivate, and remind competitors and the average gym goer that even the most extreme lifestyles and elite athletes have their ups and downs. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I'm your host, Celeste Rains-Turk, and now it's time for the Confessions of a Bikini Pro podcast. For this episode, we will be speaking with a contest prep and lifestyle coach for Camp Jansen, who recently left her day job at an anti-aging and hormone replacement therapy clinic to build her business of working to break the stigma that surrounds the bikini division. This athlete started competing in 2017 and has done 6 shows, with her 6th being 2020 National Championships, where she won her pro card and the overall. She has a love for travel, but has settled in Florida with her boyfriend and their 2 Frenchies. And I am really excited about this episode. Like, I even got on an hour early because I'm so excited. So welcome to the show, Nadia Szymanowicz. How are you doing?
You did awesome pronouncing my last name. I'm so excited to be on and answer questions and just chat about everything you have lined up for us today. I'm really excited to get started. Thank you for having me.
Of course, absolutely. And I know we have a lot of listeners who are looking forward to this episode too. But as you know, I got to ask if there is something you do or maybe a ritual you have right before your heel hits the stage.
Okay, so I was ready for this. I'm a very frequent listener, so I definitely knew this is coming. But something that I do, a ritual I have, there's nothing specific that I say to myself or that I do, or, it's mandatory that, you're practicing your posing as I'm waiting in my hotel room. I usually have my feet up the majority of the time. I'm trying to be as relaxed as I can be. When I'm backstage, I find a comfy, quiet spot, usually like in a corner somewhere away from the crowd. And I literally just sit down, I chill out, and I relax. I kick up my feet and I just chill. And I really just try to find my zone. And it's not even with listening to music, it's just being present in the moment. Because sometimes I find that listening to music can kind of take me out of that zone backstage. And I want to just absorb everything that I'm there for, especially last year, Nationals being the first time that I had competed since spring in 2019. I was just so excited to be there and to be backstage and to smell the smells of the pro tan and see everyone all glammed up. And I caught up with a couple ladies backstage, but for the most part, I'm just relaxing. I keep pretty quiet and to myself. And when it's time to line up, I line up, and I do say to myself, like, this is your time. Like, the time is now. You have worked and earned this. You have earned not you have earned this in terms of you have earned to win, but you have earned to enjoy every single moment that you are about to experience, that you are experiencing. And I just try and keep myself as calm and relaxed as possible, and just really soak it all in and enjoy it, because it was something that I had missed for so long, especially with the year that 2020 was. I wasn't doing all the national shows. We had just set out to do nationals. So to be back there and be in the moment and soak it all in was my biggest priority. And at one point, Alyssa from Pro Tan, she had saw me backstage just like laying down with my eyes closed, and she had gone out to the audience where my mom and my boyfriend and my coach were sitting. And Alyssa said to them, she's just back there with her eyes closed. Like, I don't know if she's okay. And they were like, leave her alone. Don't mess with her. Like, that's a good sign. Like, she's in the zone, just chilling. So that's what I usually do, is just hang out and remain calm and soak it all in, because I want to be in the moment as long as I possibly can.
I absolutely love everything you just said. And as you were talking, I was like, oh my gosh, this is leading me to so many other questions. And I also want to just say, like, shout out to Alyssa, because she is so sweet. Like,
she's the bomb.
She really is. She's been on this show. So anyone listening, if you're trying to figure out like DIY tans or pro tan or anything like that, she's been on it. We give like a great discount code for listeners here too, and I'll put that in the show notes link. But I did want to mention, like, before USA's, I had like this issue with my tan, and she literally FaceTimed me just to help. Like, she
Aw.
literally cares that much. Like, she wasn't even at the show. She just wanted to make sure it was good. And I think that says a lot. But something I want to touch on that you specifically said is you get away from the crowd, you really just get in your own zone.
Mhm.
And I was curious if you have ever felt pressure or like a need to communicate or connect with people backstage, like other competitors or athletes or teammates.
Yeah, so when I am in the lineup, I remember specifically, like, regardless of whether it's competing or in my history in the past as an athlete, I've done several sports before I was a competitor. I would always like make friends. I was always like, not necessarily the peacekeeper, but I was the warm and bubbly one. And I was always very uppity and, I'm like making small talk with everyone around me. So there was a couple girls in front of me and behind me in line who I just, I'm complimenting them and I'm like, oh my gosh, this suit is gorgeous. And with your hair, it looks amazing. Like, what's your name? I'm Nadia. Like, just making friends because at that time, we have all done the work, we have all put in the time. There's no reason why we can't enjoy each other's company too. And it might be out of nervousness that I get chatty, but I think it's just a habit, is just to like, part of being in that moment is being in that moment and sharing it with the other girls. And that's something that I really cherish because I know that we're all there to do the same thing. It's just show our best work and have a great time. If I'm, in contact with someone through Instagram or someone on my team, maybe, or an athlete, a client of mine that is at the show, I will do my best to, in my time when it's appropriate, meet up with them. And for me, that time isn't necessarily when I'm backstage in that precious zone of mine. Granted, it's not like you can't come up and talk to me. Like, it's just my preference to find a quiet place and just collect my thoughts and be one with myself and stuff like that. But I definitely met up with some girlfriends. I met up with a client. I definitely got to see all the people I wanted to see and meet new faces and meet up with some girls backstage. So I don't think it's not necessarily something I feel pressured to do, but I definitely like to respect my boundary in terms of setting that time before I get on to enjoy that moment. And it's more so before prejudging that I kind of zone myself out and separate myself. And before finals, when you have the comfort of knowing somewhat the result, it's easier for me to kind of swim out of that bubble and be a little more mingly, if you could say.
Yes, like by then, okay, as long as you're still bringing it to finals, you
Mhm.
probably sealed your placement. The judging is pretty much done unless it's a huge show, in which case, I mean, most of the times they still already know they're at least their top three, if not, their number one and two. And I know for you specifically at that show, it was a unanimous decision on the judges' part. And I'm really excited to talk to you about that because there's so much I think that can be learned from that. But also, I imagine there's some thoughts that come with hearing something like that. But anyway, we'll get into that later. But
Okay.
I did want to know, like, did you always live this lifestyle before starting competing?
So I tracked my macros and I worked out consistently all through high school. I started competing. It was let's see, I honestly forget what year of high school it was because my high school, I was a full-time student at the school for 2 years and then I was fully enrolled with the college for 2 years. So it's all kind of like a big just mash in my brain right now. But it was 2017. Okay, so I was a senior because I graduated in 2017. So I started working out and training pretty consistently right off the bat. I wanted to learn as much as I could. I wanted to go very much all in, and I wasn't about to waste my time half-assing it, if that makes sense. So I was pretty consistent with my habits when I started to learn more about nutrition and how to train. Like it would, when I was learning about working out, like it would frustrate me to not do something right. And I wouldn't let myself leave until I figured it out, because I would work out with my boyfriend at the time before school. And he was like, no, this is wrong. Like you're doing it wrong. And I'm like, well, show me how to do it. I'm not leaving until we do it. Like, but you've been trying for 10 sets. Like we're not going anywhere. And I'm like, just show me how to do it and then I'll move on. Like I was
Love
very
it.
stubborn in that sense, but I was not necessarily like I wouldn't say that I ate super healthy. I wasn't super conscious of what I was eating because before that. Um, but I was always a competitive athlete, whether it be volleyball or I even played hockey. I ran track and did the long jump event in the field. I was always very active and very competitive. And like in gym class, I was always playing football with the boys during our break. And I really, really enjoyed just being active and being in the action. It was always something that I enjoyed, but as far as consistency with nutrition, that wasn't something that I really dove into until I started training and getting more familiar with the gym, because I realized I was like, okay, I can train all this time, but there's a reason why all these people who look this way and who live this lifestyle have certain eating habits and um, follow certain diets and things and prefer these foods over these foods, etc. So that was something I was very curious about. And once I more so paid attention to my nutrition rather than my training, I think is when I started to notice the most change. And it just, I think, took off my interest from there. I was always just very curious.
That's a really good point. And I think it's important that that's made in the sense of nutrition really does matter and training does matter. And it's
Mhm.
every single rep, every meal, everything counts. And I'm curious how you changed your nutrition. Was it before you were tracking macros but not prioritizing certain nutrients, or was it you started tracking macros?
Yes. So I was tracking macros, and I remember to this day, I fit a whole pint of Ben and Jerry's in my macros and then went and trained and I felt like garbage.
I
And
can imagine.
but it fit my macros, so it was fine, right? But I just didn't know better at the time. So I watched a lot of YouTube videos. I studied a lot of people on Instagram, and um, I had friends at the time who were a little bit more advanced. These friends I had met in the gym who were a little bit more advanced than I was in their fitness journey, who knew a lot more. And I was always very open to receiving the knowledge that they had and just learning, because like I said, I was just very curious. I naturally I'm competitive and I want to be good at what I'm doing. And I want to, again, not waste my time. So I was like, I want to maximize this in every way possible. So I tried my best to just be a sponge to anything and everything I could learn, whether it might have been in my favor or not. Like there's some things that I probably maybe did wrong still, even though I thought they were in my best interest. Um, but definitely figuring out within tracking macros that, okay, I'm going to feel better when I feel my workout with this versus this and things like that.
I love that. I think that when we consider the benefit of what we're putting in our body, and it's not just about like, I've worked with plenty of girls who follow macros, and I find it's very interesting how, regardless if you're on a macro or meal plan, your relationship with food can be tested or changed because of it. And a lot of times, people who follow macro approaches maybe stop thinking so much about the benefit of the food and more so about just fitting the macros.
Yeah, it becomes a
And
number at some point. Like
exactly. And you
it's,
obsess over it.
yeah, exactly. Macros have taught me so much and have made me extremely conscious in a good way, and I think in a bad way, with my relationship in how I view food. And because a lot of times I look at a plate of food and I see numbers and qualities in food and nutrients rather than for what it is. It's just food on a plate, you know? But I think all of us as competitors are slightly, I don't want to say skewed, because it's not like it's a bad thing that we're so hyper aware of that kind of thing, but um, we definitely overanalyze, and we are hypercritical more so than the average person looking at a plate of food. But it's made me very conscious about, like I do follow meal plan now, makes me very conscious about substitutions. and things I can swap. And it's made me very familiar with portion sizes. And if I didn't have a scale, I would be fine because I'm so used to plugging my food in and weighing it out every single day. And it's made me very familiar with food sources and food amounts and nutrient sources. And for that, I'm really glad that I started out with tracking macros. And I think that's what's made a meal plan now more successful for me, knowing that I have that history of being so familiar with calorie counts of things and food amounts and things like that. So I always like to suggest for like first timers also that, they are familiar with macros and nutrient timing and food sources and swaps they can make and things like that. If they don't have something on hand, that's the beauty of macros and counting and tracking them, is that it's also adjustable, not that a meal plan isn't, because it very much is. If you are familiar with those items, you can interchange and swap. Now, do I do that all the time? No, I follow what I follow. But in the event, like I'm out of rice, I'm having cream of rice. You know what I'm saying? Just small little things that aren't like, oh my God, like I'm failing my plan, I'm out of rice. Like that's not the case. Like you can make it work, you can make it happen. I'll just like it happens to me frequently where I need to substitute something. Like for a little while, I had potatoes, white potato pre-workout, and the amount I was having with my schedule, I was just eating it too soon before my training, and I was just full because I would normally train when I got off work, and I would eat at 4:30 p.m. and train at 5, and having that amount just made me too full. Now I switched to cream of rice before, and I digest that a lot quicker. That works a lot better for me. Is it the same thing? Does it mean I'm failing my plan? No. It's not me not following it. It's me making a smarter substitution. And of course, I let my coach know, and he's like, yeah, that's cool. Like, as if that's better for you, let's do that. So being familiar with that has helped me a lot, I think.
I could not agree more. I think that goes back to your point of maximizing what you're doing.
Mhm.
And if having something that didn't digest as quickly was keeping you from getting the most out of your workouts, then you're not maximizing that. So, in understanding how swaps work or macros work, it actually allowed you to maximize the potential of your meal plan as
Mhm.
well. And I think that's a really great way of looking at it. And I had a listener who had submitted a question. She wanted to know specifically for you. And by the way, something I've always loved about you is you keep it very real, like how in the past in a prep, you would obsess over food, like maybe have a list of the foods, or it would be something that would take your focus away from prep. And I like how you don't do that because
Mhm.
you want to keep the focus on prep. But a
Yeah.
listener did want to know if you believe it's possible to have a healthy relationship with food on and off prep, and then how do you yourself prioritize that?
Okay. So, I mean, like I had mentioned, I have always, since tracking macros, since weighing out my food, and even just before I even got a food scale and eyeballing my portions and things, I've always had a different relationship with food than I ever will have before I started any of this. So that I think is changed for the rest of my life. It might not be that way for everybody, but that just kind of it relates to what I mentioned, how we kind of overanalyze, and
Mm-hmm.
we're a little bit more hypercritical, and we see food as numbers and for the value that it is. And essentially, I mean, you want it to be viewed as fuel and how it's going to make you feel and how it's going to make you perform. And when you view it in that light, I think it's a lot more productive and less, it brings down less food anxiety and less anxiety around food related thoughts and overthinking, that kind of thing, when you're focusing on how it's going to make you feel. Like when, if I have an athlete who's being suggested a refeed meal or an untracked meal, and they're so afraid to eat it because it's not on their plan, it's not one of their meals 1 through 6 or 1 through 5 or whatever, I'll say, no, it is your plan. It's what I'm suggesting you do for your success. And that doesn't mean go out and raid the pantry and get everything off the menu. That means have something that is going to make you feel good and is going to power your training session the next day. and be the best decision for you. So being able to be aware of your thoughts around the food and how you're viewing what you're eating, not so much as something to be scared of because it's not on paper, but something, because a lot of people don't trust their own choices. And I think that's what it comes down to, is being able to trust yourself and that you're making the best decision for yourself. And when you strip your coach and their suggestions out of it, there's like all of a sudden panic in the air. So something that I suggest is just thinking about how that's going to feel you and how that's going to make you feel. And of course, it's easier said than done, because I myself have come from a history of never being diagnosed with an eating disorder, but definitely having disordered habits within my eating and my food relationships. And whether it be, like, I'll just say that I was at one point in high school, I'm like 140 pounds now in my off season with having 6 shows under my belt. Before I started competing, I was 105 pounds at one point. So there was a time where I was severely under eating. It was something that I could control in my life. And if I could control how I look through the food choices I made and, you know, getting compliment after compliment when I was getting smaller and smaller, um, that further drove that. And then it turned into being in a relationship with someone with some binge eating issues that I kind of took on myself. And then being able to, or not being able to, but rather than using food as like a comfort coping tool, because it was like, oh, you had a long day. Let me make you this. You're going through this tough time. Why don't you come over and I'll cook this for us? So that's how my family is. So I have my Polish family who's out of the country, and their food's amazing. But then I have my family here who is all Italian, and they're also very heavily involved in the kitchen and cooking and, eat what you can, finish your plate, and then have the rest is what they would always say to me. So myself, it's even something, I'll be honest and say it's something I still struggle with, and something that I'm still working on healing myself is making sure that I am not overthinking it as I coach my clients not to, and that when I am uncomfortable or I am anxious or I am stressed, that my coping mechanism at the end of the day is a release of endorphins, right? So that endorphin release doesn't need to solely come from food, which is so fleeting. It's good for the 5 seconds it's being chewed up in your mouth and then it's gone. And to keep that feeling there, you keep going more and more and more. And it's so funny that I'm telling you this being the conversation we had earlier.
I know. I almost didn't ask because I was like, well, maybe it'll make her uncomfortable. But I was like, well, maybe she wants to open up about it. And so I decided to just ask.
Yeah, of course. I'm happy to answer. So it's like, I'm not stupid. I do know better, but I'm human and I have feelings and I'm not perfect. And it's very normal. It's not that I expect anyone to be perfect. It's that I expect them to be aware of the imperfection, brush it off, realize what it is, what triggered it, and keep trying, keep moving forward. There's never a moment where the towel is thrown in. Like I even had an athlete last week who checked in with me and where her response to me says deviations to the plan, if any. She told me that she had had like an extra yogurt at night. And that in her situation was a win because it didn't spiral into a bunch of other things and her whole fridge being empty the next day, because she was able to call herself out on it and she was able to recognize why she was feeling what she was feeling, and she channeled that anxious energy or that feeling of stress. She lives in Texas, so last week in Texas with all the snow and being out of power and not being able to leave her house, she felt very cooped up and stressed. And for her to be able to acknowledge, okay, this is why this feeling is being triggered. This is why I am, craving this. It's not craving the food, it's craving the feeling and that release of endorphins and the comfort that it provides. So I've suggested, like, something that I'll do and that I suggest is I have a sketchbook where I will doodle and draw, and I really love to do that. I have a journal. I will go out and walk my dogs. I will read, I will throw on a face mask. So even if I wanted to put something in my mouth, I couldn't because my face is stuck shut.
Definitely.
But different tools to just cope with those feelings. I think people aren't aware of just finding some kind of self-care and some kind of feel-good activity that's going to help. And it's beyond just what food can provide. And it's often something that kind of helps ground you too. Like um, get out of your kitchen, go for a walk, read a book, like listen to a podcast. There's so many other things that you can do with your time that are going to bring you more clarity than when that flip of that switch goes off and you black out and then you decide to eat. It's something that I've experienced myself. You almost don't regain consciousness until it's
Mhm.
over. And by the time it's over, you're like, what the hell did I just do? And why did I do it? So being able to just breathe and be aware, I think self-awareness is the biggest thing in those situations, and being able to call yourself out is going to be the biggest the biggest inhibitor of where you can catch yourself kind of falling into that hole, and being able to pull yourself out with that self-awareness and that consciousness that you do have, and being aware of why you're feeling a certain way, what happened in your day that's making you feel this way, and so on.
Absolutely. And I think with that comes like being willing to actually sit with the emotion or whatever is guiding you to want to go and do that, because we so often want to just like run away from it, and it's like, well, part of the beautiful thing about being human and having emotions is it's teaching us so much.
Yes.
And it's like when we allow ourselves to do something like doodle or like put on a face mask and just sit there, we give ourselves space to allow the emotions to come through, to pass, to also face them, which can be a really great preventative measure as well. So, and you're right, it's a lot of times it's not about the food at all. And I appreciate you opening up and sharing about that, and also recognizing, it is a work in progress for pretty much
Yeah.
everybody. And competitors are, there's risk factors that come with competing, even just, an excess focus on body and food. And it's like that kind of comes with the territory. So if you're not willing to also prioritize that, then are you willing to take on, the result of a successful competitor? I'm truly under the belief that you need to be able to focus on all of it in order to eventually achieve, the most successful and fulfilling preps and improvement seasons. And with that said, I mean, you've had a very super successful run as a competitor. You always place first in your class all the way to your pro card win, with the exception, I believe, of like one class at a show, which was still second place. So
Yeah.
that's amazing. And you're welcome. No, that's huge. And I was curious when you and your coach decided you were ready to begin competing on the national stage.
Okay. So for me, I don't believe that it's necessary for everyone at all, but I wanted to win an overall at a show, at a local show first. I had these like mini milestones that I wanted to achieve before my big milestone, earning my pro card. And I think that's something important for other competitors to keep in mind too, not necessarily that the overall at a local show, at a regional show has to be your goal, but you have this goal that's so far off. Set those micro goals that keep that journey so exciting, that keep you trying, that keep you giving your best effort. I had done, let's see, I started working with this coach um, in the summer of, I want to say 2018. Yes. Okay. Summer of 2018. This was after a really, really bad rebound and gaining like 40 pounds within 3 months after a show earlier that year. So we
Mm-hmm.
had a lot of work to do. I had done like a 12-week prep from, let's see, we started, well, the show was in October. So we started 12 weeks before then. And that was my first show with this coach. And I wasn't all the way in shape. This was that second place that I had gotten.
Oh,
I wasn't completely in shape. I came in a bit soft. And we knew we still had some room to work. And there was another show being down here in Florida. There's shows in a normal year, in a normal season, there's shows here all the time. And there was another show 3 or 4 weeks later, and it was about like 20, 30 minutes from me. So I was like, okay, like I can't not do this. And so we pushed and we made it happen. And I did win the overall there. But it was just something that I wanted to accomplish before doing that. And then after then, I was like, oh, well, depending on how this second show goes, we can do nationals. But then what ended up happening, because this second one was like the last weekend in October, and the nationals being like the second week in November. So I was like, depending on how this goes, we'll do nationals, right? But after this second show, I didn't really have much more room to keep pulling calories and keep pulling food. I didn't have much more in me in terms of doing more cardio. I was doing at that point 2 hours of intervals almost every day. So it wasn't just steady state, lower heart rate. It was high intensity. My training was suffering as a result of the high intensity that I wasn't able to recover as from because of the little amount I was eating. And that's just nothing against that. That's what it took for me to get there. But it wouldn't have been smart for me to do nationals then, because I would have been stringy. I would have been tired looking. I wouldn't have been fresh. So we decided to regroup after that, reverse diet a little bit and get my food up and my calories to a good place where I have a solid baseline that I'm maintaining, cardio back down to a more realistic place that was more maintainable. And we decided to do Junior USA the following year. And it was in Charleston. It was going to be something we could still drive to. My boyfriend, Eddie, now ended up doing that too. He won his pro card there, which was so awesome to experience with him. But once we had my body in a better place, we decided to do that show and get ready for that show. And that was about 12 weeks as well. And I still, no matter how well I reverse diet and how well I rebound, no matter how long I have a break, at the end of my prep, it always is low calories, high cardio. That's just what it takes for me to get there. And nothing against the people that have that. If it's something that you can do and still be fresh and still be performing and make it work. If you're miserable, it's not, you need to reevaluate things. But I mean, in the moment, I'm like doing so much, and then I'm my crazy self. I'm like, can I do more?
Right.
And then like now I'm doing my 20 minutes cardio and 19 minutes and 59 seconds. I'm like, okay, done.
Yeah.
Like I'm good with that. That's enough. But at the time, when you're so deep into it and you're just like so tunnel visioned, it's very easy to be like, okay, more. But before, basically to answer your question, I needed my body to be in a more stable place, and just doing Junior USA before, as my first national show, before doing nationals like we were going to the year before, it was just smarter for me to be more fresh, more rested, and just having more time between shows. Because if I would have done nationals the year before, I would have done 3 shows in the span of I think like 2 months, which is just really stretched out. Like if they were back to back, maybe it would have been more realistic, because it was just another week. I was basically already there, but it was about like 3 weeks away. So it was 3 more weeks of holding on to something that my body was just becoming more and more resistant to. So before doing a national show, just making sure I was in a place where I was refreshed and rested and metabolically in a more stable place that I was going to respond better to. And the same thing happened getting ready for nationals. I was getting ready for all these shows in the spring that were either canceled or postponed. And I started working with Matt in the summer or springtime of last year, around May. And he had suggested we need to pull our foot off the gas. We are not going to try and stay ready and keep getting ready for these shows And I was like, but I'm already lean. Like I'm already there. Like I've spent the last 6 months getting ready. Like, why can't I stay here and keep going? Because Junior USA then was rescheduled to August. And I'm like, what's another few months, right? And then I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, well, if being patient and if trusting my time waiting brought me to winning my class at Junior USA the year prior, then I shouldn't fear waiting again, because waiting has never done anything for me, but, helped me. Having more time has never done anything but help me more. So we had for 8 weeks, I think it was like 6 to 8 weeks, we had immediately put calories up, immediately backed off of cardio. Did I gain a significant amount back? Yeah, probably like 20 pounds, which I was like, I mean, at that time I felt like I was letting him down, letting myself down. I was going backwards, like, because we were basically slowly undoing all that dieting to get myself to a more stable place where we could then attack prep for nationals. But I didn't realize at the time that what we were doing, he was like, trust me, this is good. This is what I want to see. Because as my body fat's coming on, I'm getting stronger in the gym. I'm not so hungry. I'm not so food focused. I feel fresher. I'm sleeping better. I have more energy during the day. Like my quality of life, even though my pictures aren't as pretty, my quality of life is just improving everywhere, right? From being so lean for that long. And so it was really just preparing me to have that much more of a successful prep. It was steps taken that might look like I was going backwards, but they were really setting me up to move forwards and have a good prep. And still, at the end of it all, I was doing a lot of cardio. I wasn't eating a lot. That's just me. But giving myself that time and being patient and allowing my body to get to a place where personally I have to have some fat on me to have my cycle. I have to be able to be at a place where I'm not doing a lot of cardio, because I'm going to need all that cardio later on at the end of prep to respond to when I need it to work most, if that makes sense. So just being patient and giving myself time and trusting that the wait is going to be worth it was the biggest thing for me.
Definitely. I think that's really important, is seeing how taking that time is actually what's gonna ultimately, and what ultimately has, like you said, only been beneficial for you and allowed you to bring even more improved physique to the stage every single time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes when we give into that, oh no, I'm gaining weight too quickly, even if it's, what your coach wants, and then you're thinking, I should just hop on another prep. I want to get back into it. Well, then you see girls who step on stage again, or they start a prep again, and they're not ready to necessarily, right? Like they don't
Yeah.
have the calories up. They don't have, they haven't even reached homeostasis. And that's something you've discussed before, is like the importance of finding a healthy homeostasis. And this is
Yeah.
something that you've been able to do, is restore your own hormone health. And you were talking about even just quality of life, focus, the way that you're performing in the gym, it's all gone up. And I was wondering if you could share, maybe this is like some of your coaching secrets, but what are some things competitors can look for to know that they've found their homeostasis?
Okay. In terms of training progress, is your training stalled? Are you, not going anywhere in the gym in terms of hitting PRs, whether it be by a few reps or whether it's increasing weight? If you look back a month ago, have you progressed in any way? Are you lifting heavier? Do you have more energy in the gym? Have you improved on movement patterns and exercises that you were weak on previously? In terms of food, is your body now, because I normally I will set up a baseline and then see what happens with that baseline of calories. Is that baseline of calories, are you now hungrier with that calorie intake? Are you gaining weight every single week with that calorie intake? How is your body responding to food? Are you hyper responsive, and have you caught up to that baseline to where you now need more food because your training's going so well and you're recovering so well that you've put on more tissue and now you're hungrier and you need more fuel in the tank? Are you sleeping at night? Are you rested? Do you feel like you need your rest days, or are you restless and mentally not able to take a rest day because you're so anxious? I think mentally it's important to find that mental homeostasis as well as physical, and being okay with not being in quotes, prep mode, and feeling like you have to do more and more and more every single day. Um, what else can we talk about? So blood work, I personally do it before I start prep and about a month after shows. I will do my blood work, which in the past has been like every 6 months, just on a pattern, assessing that. And, you know, if reproductive hormones are low, if you're not producing progesterone, you're likely not getting a period. If your estrogen is super high, there's different supplements you can take to help with that. Did your coach responsibly wean you off of any kind of performance enhancing drugs that you were using before the show, or did you just stop taking everything and now your hormones are jacked up as a result? Vitamin D for me was a huge thing recently, because I, even in Florida, I don't go in the sun much at all. And I had some symptoms of low vitamin D that I had a feeling it might be why I was feeling the way I was feeling and experiencing the symptoms I was. And sure enough, in my blood work, it was very low. And now we're taking care of that. I have to do an injection of, it's 50,000 units weekly that I'm doing of vitamin D. So 2 shots in my belly each week of vitamin D, and I've significantly noticed improvements within the headaches I was experiencing, my mood and my temper. At one point, honestly, it was hard for me to even just want to get out of bed because I felt so in a funk. And I just felt like purposeless. Like I'm like, okay, pro card, now what? I had dealt with some things during my prep that the win kind of balanced it all out. And it was like, okay, I won, like it was worth it. And now after, when that feeling, that fleeting feeling leaves you, and it's like now you're left to dealt with these things. I think I just took them on a lot more heavily because hormonally I was a little bit off. But now we're taking care of those things. I have a regular cycle. My vitamin D, I'm assuming, is closer to normal range because I just feel so much better. Um, I had to donate blood because my iron was super high, and my hemoglobin and hematocrit were on the high end of the range. And so while my blood wasn't necessarily thick, it was just causing me headaches because it was elevated. And we took care of it through donating some blood. And immediately after, I felt better. Um, let's see, in terms of reaching homeostasis, where are you in terms of fluctuations? Are you pretty steady and constant on the scale? Does your body look different every single week, or are you riding out and cruising through a consistent plan? Is your biofeedback relatively the same? Like you're not very stressed, you're not very hungry, or you are very hungry? Just assessing biofeedback and hormone health and mental health, where you are mentally, I think is all important and encompasses where that place of homeostasis is for everyone as an individual. I am always someone whose homeostasis is usually about like 25 pounds above their stage weight. And do I prefer that? For me, no, not necessarily, but that weight gain is necessary for me. And what also allows me to change and make progress from show to show. Because a lot of these people who don't give themselves enough time and do shows back to back to back to back, they might not be doing as well. And that might be because they aren't allowing themselves to have that time to make progress. So in that time of your body not being so stressed, where you're hormonally healthy, mentally in a good place, you're stable, you're going to make the most progress there. And maximizing your time there is only going to allow you to progress more. So having that time, like if we rewind to the last question, between my shows in the fall and Junior USA, I was able to progress there because I reached homeostasis between having the time when I had started working with Matt to kind of get out of that super lean state I was in when those shows were being canceled, and to feed me more and to push more in the gym and to reduce cardio so I could recover better. I changed significantly through those few months I first started out with mat and a more intense style of training, doing higher intensity and heavier lifting rather than more higher up, higher volume workouts. That place of homeostasis is so important to just have a more successful prep overall.
Oh my goodness. Everything you just shared was so valuable. I was literally like I was writing so many notes and just listening so intently because that was amazing of you to share.
Oh,
So,
thank you. I hope I'm not like
yes.
ranting too long.
No, I live for that. Like, I love
Okay.
it when that happens. Like, oh my gosh, there's so much value in what you said. Like, I'd even encourage listeners to rewind and hear again because in hearing your experiences and stories, it gives them insight into what they can look for. And then there were key things you mentioned as well that they can do or consider if they're not performing optimally or so they can reach homeostasis. And I thought it was so cool too how you said, "Hey, it may not be ideal for me that it wouldn't be my first choice to have to gain, 20, 25 pounds from stage weight, but if it brings a better package the next time I prep or the next time I step on stage, and I did it in a way that actually allowed me to have a higher quality of life and I felt good about it. And like all those things, those boxes are checked, then I'm not going to be upset about it. Like I'm not going to restrain myself from making those improvements. And then you talked about changing your training style as well. You went from higher volume to higher intensity and higher weight. And I'd love because this goes to what I said in the intro of you breaking the stigma about bikini competitors. And I think you're a great representation of girls who train really hard in the gym, like not leaving anything left to chance. And even like you said back in high school, like not leaving until it was done right. So I'd love to know how you essentially train in the gym or get yourself to that point. And is that different when you enter a prep? Do you go back to higher volume or do you just keep things as is?
No, so during prep, whatever was working for me in the off season is going to keep my muscle on during prep. So I don't change training at all. I keep performing my same program, and that usually looks like a few warm up sets of a weight that is moderate difficulty to get my muscles warm and primed for my top sets. And I don't want to pre-exhaust myself so much. So I'm going to do a warm-up set of maybe like 6 to 8 reps, a few warm-up sets there. And then I will do 2 working sets of I have some styles of execution where I will do like one, for example, a neutral grip lat pull down. My 2 top sets are my first set is aiming to 12 reps, being I'm failing at the 12th rep. And then my second top set is a rest pause, where my goal is to aim for 15 reps with that same weight I failed at 12 for. But with the rest pause, I'm doing an attempt, which might be like 8 reps, and then a rest for 15 seconds, and then another attempt of maybe I can pump out 5 more, and then another rest of like 15 seconds. And I repeat till I reach that 15 reps, whether it be resting to get 2 and then resting to get 1 more. That just kind of goes to show the level of intensity that is being brought to the table, and the level of effort that you're applying. Because when I had first started all this out, I would pick up my normal weight that I had in the past done like 20, 30 reps for, like shoulder pressing, for example. I'm picking up like 20 pounds. I could get that for like 30 reps, right? Which I had done in the past. It's like, okay, so let's say I'm doing like the same style as I explained those lat pull downs.
Mm-hmm.
I do 12 reps. I realize how much stronger I am within 12 reps versus 20 to 30. And I am, in these reps, not getting sloppy, even though they're difficult at the end. I'm maintaining good form, but I am so much more powerful and so much stronger. And I can produce the demand for more new tissue repair so much more through being so much more intense with my training and training heavier than I would just getting a pump and putting blood into the muscle and training for volume, if that makes sense.
Definitely makes sense. Like essentially you're placing a higher demand using a higher load.
Yes, exactly.
Awesome. I think that's really cool too because it definitely breaks the norm, or maybe I shouldn't even say norm because I think it's changing a lot, but the preconceived norm of bikini competitors and how we train. And I think there's a difference. And I noticed personally, like in this improvement season, like I've brought a completely different energy into the gym than I've ever brought before. And it feels so good. And I
It's
think
empowering.
it
Yeah.
is just like you said, like you look at your numbers and you're like, oh my gosh, like I'm literally progressively overloading every week. Or, oh my goodness, I used to do this on this movement and now I'm knocking out X amount of reps and I'm using a higher rep range, let's say, for those sets where you're doing rest pauses. And I think that is really rewarding and something to really celebrate and look forward to about improvement seasons. And what about your nutrition? Does your nutrition change? I know you said you usually pull back cardio a lot and then you increase food a lot. Do you change anything about your approach to it?
No, more so. The first thing to go up is my carbohydrate sources around my training. And then as soon as we get carbs to a good place, we're going to add more fats for satiety's sake, because normally when you have more of that gas in the tank and your engine's firing and you're just burning through them, you'll be hungrier. And so those fats are going to help slow the digestion, absorption of those carbs, and going to help you feel a little bit fuller for a bit longer. So all of my foods are generally the same, just a little bit more of them. Something that we did do that is different is my last meal, like during prep, it was usually like fish and some vegetable. Or like on a high day, it was salmon and potatoes and a vegetable. But now, me and my sweet tooth, I have a bowl of Greek yogurt and granola and nut butter. And that's something like I never thought I would have on my meal plan. That's something that I really enjoy for myself and for other athletes and clients that have a sweet tooth at night. It's a nice meal, something that it has a little bit of salty from the peanut butter, a little bit of sweet in the protein, and then the crunch in the granola. It solves all areas. It
I
covers all.
love that. People used to think I was so weird for putting peanut butter in Greek yogurt. I'm like, you have no idea how good this is. Like, and then if you add fruits like a PB&J a little bit,
Yeah, exactly.
it's good. So I love that you're willing to make that swap, and like sometimes you change that approach up, and I think that's important. Like, yes, there's a lot of value in consistency, and consistency can look different depending on your needs. And you mentioned, and part of finding homeostasis in an off season, not only does it impact your training and your quality of life, your mental clarity, and you shared amazing things just about your mood changing as well when you take those approaches to change. I was curious, did that come from doctor recommendation, coach recommendation, things that you knew that you needed to do? Like, how did you know that, okay, if I'm getting these headaches, maybe I should donate blood? And I know that's a very simplified version of what you shared. It wasn't more so I'm getting headaches, let me get blood work, seeing that blood work result, and then going, oh, this is really high, and this is probably a sign that the blood is quote unquote thicker, and then donating it would help.
Okay, so with working at where I work with the hormone replacement and the vitamin therapy and the hormone optimization that we do, I have a very fortunate surrounding to where I have a lot of access to these tools, such as being able to have and be very close with our nurse practitioners, our staff, our doctors, everyone who's very familiar with reading blood work and hormone treatment, and recognizing signs and symptoms. Like in our facility, like I'm sitting right now in Revive in my office, and in Revive, we have some office spaces for us. And there's myself, my coach, Matt Jansen, has an office. I don't know if you're familiar with Alan Kress. He has an office here. Savannah and her boyfriend, Scott, they're working as independent coaches now. They moved down here recently. So we have this really big group of just very smart individuals between the coaches and the staff at the clinic. So I knew I'm surrounded by a lot of great people. And so I knew after the show that I wanted to get my blood work done after I had some time to get my food up, and see what was going on and have some more time to allow my body to become a bit more fresh. So that was the first step, is just routinely getting my blood work done. And then second, I show it to my coach. I show it to the nurse practitioners, and we call them patient coordinators here, but they usually help patients with suggestions and advice when it comes to blood work results. Um, so having guidance from the clinical side and the coaching side really helped me to make these choices as to what direction needs to be taken.
That's awesome. I love how you're able to use your resources as well. I think uh, we can all take a note out of that book in the sense of we have so many resources in the bodybuilding community and so many people who are willing to help and offer support because we all want to see each other perform at a high level. And I think it's great that you went out of your way to say, this is important to me and it's important enough to do something about it. And you've always done that. And one other thing that you talked about was if you were essentially cycled off of PEDs properly. And recently you posted on your story, and I'm not sure if you had posted about it in the past. I know I had, this was the first time I saw it, but I was curious what inspired you to be open about using PEDs. And then another listener actually wanted to know what inspired you to start choosing to become an enhanced athlete.
Okay, so when I decided to make the decision to use PEDs, it was at a time where I had been competing for a little bit of time. I had been consistent all throughout high school, and like off the bat, like I said, like I was consistent. I was in the gym regularly. I was it wasn't like I had gone to the gym here and there, and then when I discovered competing, I was all in.
Right.
I was all in and very consistent, and I put in my time from the get-go. And so having years of being adherent and making progress in the gym and doing as much as I knew I could, as well as I knew I could, um, it was then that I decided to take it to the next level with my competing career, and being that I trusted my coach then, um, I was curious and I knew it was something that I wasn't comfortable about just handling myself. I wanted to do it the right way because I've heard all the horror stories about how
Mm-hmm.
bad it can go if it's not done correctly. So, um, first we did blood work to see if I was, medically a good candidate for, like, if my liver function was okay, if my kidney functions were okay, as sometimes as bikini competitors we're more times than not using some kind of oral PEDs, and that is going to be a little bit more harsh on the liver and kidneys depending on the dose. And I'm not going to get like super into detail, but because that's for you and your coach to decide, to all the listeners.
Love it.
But it's a little bit more harsh on the liver and kidneys than anything else. So making sure that my levels there were okay. And what else did we look into? My thyroid was in a great place to start dieting and be competitive again for the shows that I wanted to continue doing. This was after, in the past, I had blood work done to assess what went wrong during this prep, that nothing just seemed to work. So after that show, I did blood work then. This was in 2018, and I was prescribed a natural thyroid medication. And you hear people using T3 for the competitive advantage,
Mm-hmm.
but my natural thyroid medication, it was porcine. So it was, I think it's pig, some kind of protein in pigs that is taken out and used for your thyroid.
Hmm.
Um, and that wasn't really doing much for me. So I was put on a dose of T3, and not for any kind of physique enhancement reasons, but because my blood work said you need this. So
Yeah.
even with it now, like I take it year round because I need to. And even taking it now, my thyroid, my T3 is on the low end, like barely in range. So I take the T3 as well as a thyroid supplement and selenium, which is also really good for your thyroid. It's a supplement you can get off Amazon. But so I supplement regularly to keep up with that stuff. But then the choice to start PEDs was something that I felt comfortable making because my coach presented, everything I can expect, the repercussions, if any. He made me very aware of what I'm getting into. I asked a lot of questions. And like I said earlier, like I'm a sponge, like I want to know, I'm very curious. So if this is something that anyone's interested in, ask your coach, be comfortable about talking to your coach about it. Don't reach out to a friend and do it behind your coach's back. Because I'm sure there's people in the gym that, have you competed? Oh, you're a competitor. Have you tried this? Have you done this? There's always going to be little voices in your ears sometimes. At least there was for me. And being comfortable and talking with my coach and my friends who were competitors that were further along in their journeys than me, who were like, no, you have no business messing with that. Or, yeah, that's something that you should definitely ask about. It's widely used, and, get your feet wet and see if it's something that would be a fit for you. So it's something that I didn't just blindly go into. It was something that I really researched and studied and asked questions and did my time learning about before it was a decision I decided to make. And it was on me. It wasn't something that my coach was like, okay, this is on your plan, find it and take it. Because I've heard of that before, where clients will say, well, my coach just told me to do this and take this, and I have no idea what it is or what it does or what it means and what's going to happen. And I've had friends personally who have been literally handed things, and their bodies and voices and like they're changed permanently. And it's something that was on me, not my coach at the time, to begin to get into. And then what started me wanting to share it online is I see all these girls who are natural athletes, and they put out there how possible it is for them to be successful as a natural athlete. And I think that is awesome. I think it's amazing. I would prefer to not do anything to enhance my body if I didn't need to. And I think it's awesome that these girls are putting it out there so that girls who are just starting out in the sport don't think that bodybuilding is all just drugs and PEDs and enhancements and things. And it wasn't like that for me for a long time either, until I did start to evolve and make that decision to make that next move that was going to grant me a competitive edge, I guess you could say. But looking up on stage, no one, like, you're not going to be able to tell in a lineup of bikini girls who's doing what. Like, there's people who might be using it who are the smallest ones or are the softest ones. Or you might see the biggest girl on stage. Maybe she's just put in the most time in the gym and with her training and with her nutrition. It's not something that's going to guarantee you any success. Before they're even of question or concern or curiosity, how long have you been nailing it for? How long have you been consistent for? How much have you maximized everything you can as a natural athlete before you make that decision? Is it something that because you're looking into doing a show, you just assume and want to start doing? Because that's probably the wrong choice, as you more than likely have not been very consistent for a long time. So maximize your potential and your effort as a natural athlete first before going into any of that. And I just wanted to share that with people because I had always gotten a lot of questions like, are you a natural athlete? Are you natural? Do you use PEDs? And I'm like, well, everyone glamorizes these girls who don't use them. And I do too. Like, I applaud them because I love that people know that it's possible to do naturally. But it's also important for people to know that there are people who are successful that do decide to use them. And that's okay too. It's not taboo as long as you're doing it the right way and monitoring it closely. And you ask questions when appropriate to your coach who you trust. There's nothing wrong with deciding something for yourself. It's not like the stage is going to be an automatic win if you're using any kind of performance enhancing drugs. That's not something that I ever expected. That's not something that I would expect others to look for in their decision to or not to. It's like, well, if you're not doing well in your shows, that doesn't mean that enhancements are the next right move for you. If it's something you've been doing for a long time and you've been a competitor for a long time and you're ready to make that step for yourself, then go ahead, ask the necessary questions, make sure you trust your coach, like I said, but it's not going to guarantee you anything. You still put in the work, you still put in the time, you still put in the effort. I have done nothing different with my level of effort and intensity and focus than I did before when I was a natural athlete. My level of effort has grown and my intensity has become stronger. And I have done nothing but continue to work harder. Just because you introduce PEDs doesn't mean you take your foot off the gas. That doesn't make anything easier for you. If anything, it makes it a little bit more difficult in the event after a show when you're trying to find that place of homeostasis, or if you have a coach who did things irresponsibly with you, like it can make things a little bit more complex and confusing and a little bit more difficult because it's another variable in the equation, right? So just I mean, it's something that I decided. I was like, you know what? More people need to know that it's very real for people, especially in bikini, to be using enhancements. And that's okay. And other people need to know it's okay because, you know, who I am as a person doesn't change because I decide to use PEDs or not.
I think everything you just shared really captures the, I think, truth behind all of it, which is it's definitely not a shortcut,
Yeah.
to say the least. And you can have respect for both sides. You can have respect for all athletes. And at the end of the day, you really don't know unless someone shares it, and tells you. And I appreciate that you're willing to open up about that. I really honestly don't ever talk about it on the show, but I got a fair amount of questions come in about it. And I was like, I think it would be good to just shine light on this because you're someone who clearly has been maximizing their potential for so long. And I was curious of your thoughts on it. So I appreciate you really breaking that down for us and even highlighting the fact that it can add complexity. So if it's already complex to just do the basics, I guess you could say, then maybe it's not even worth considering that yet.
Yeah, it might not be in your cards, and that's okay too. Like you've interviewed so many incredible, successful athletes, Olympians who are natural athletes, and you've interviewed so many that might not be. I know a couple of whenever I see that in your title you have listed any kind of discussion about PEDs, I'm like, oh, I want to listen. I want to hear who's talking about it because this is so juicy. No one talks about this.
Yeah.
But I think it's important to be transparent throughout my journey because I've been approached with so many misconceptions and so many assumptions that I'm like, no, like that's not what it is. That's not the point. Like, let me share my experience and help you. So like a lot of this goes on in my DMs and I'm like, you know what? Let me just address this publicly.
Love that. I think that's, I mean, people get that all the time, no matter what. And especially to like maybe an untrained eye, and even to a trained eye, it can be hard to tell. And like you said, just because someone looks really, really good or someone doesn't look that great on stage doesn't mean they are or not using. And you mentioned the importance of the research and understanding the potential outcomes or what could really come of it. And I think that's probably what scares people the most too, is like if you're not willing to accept the potential repercussions, right, then we can't also accept the benefit if there is one to that person. And I think that goes for anything in life. Like if you want an outcome, you also have to be willing to face the potential challenges that come up in the way for that. And something that I think is really cool about you specifically, as well as you've all not just been strong in your belief systems around the choices you make and the commitments you make, but also in your goals. And you have said, set micro goals. You mentioned this earlier. And when you set micro goals, it's going to help you to get to the next one and the next one. And when you placed and you won your pro card, had you already been thinking that the following year you'd be wanting to qualify for the Olympia, or was this like a new goal that came up after winning your pro card and hearing feedback?
So the Olympia has always been a dream and a goal, but these are all micro goals I'm getting to along the way that I'm achieving, that I'm focusing on more so than the Olympia, that big win at the end of it all. The top of the ladder, before you get to the top of the ladder, you have to step up the ladder, and there's certain obstacles on your way up that are going to face you with challenge and adversity and opportunity, and you'll be able to take a lot away from those if you are more focused on them than if you let them pass on by with only having focus on this very, very, very end goal, because that can be so far away, and that can take you out of the moment, and take you and prevent you from enjoying your experiences along the way during your journey, more than they would be experienced or appreciated if you were just focused on the end goal. But there's a show that was in Fort Lauderdale. It was a Tim Gardner show the weekend after Nationals. And let's see, I said to Matt, I was like, this is in Fort Lauderdale, which is 45 minutes from me. If I win Nationals, I want to do it. And he was like, okay, if you win Nationals, we'll do it. And the day after the show on Sunday, I was like, so about that show next weekend, we just decided, with my work schedule at the time, with my personal life at the time, we had just gotten a puppy before the show. My grandmother had been so kind as to watch them for almost the whole week before the show, because we didn't take them with us, obviously. So I would have had to find more arrangements for the dogs. I would have had to book another hotel. I would have had to take more time off of work. It just would have been more stressful than to not. And I wanted to really, it was my call to not do the show that I had first expressed interest in myself, because I had really wanted to soak up the experience I just had at Nationals and winning the overall and earning my pro card. And I didn't want to just brush that off and jump ahead and move on to the next thing. And I just really wanted to absorb all of that for what it was and take it all in and enjoy that feeling, rather than, again, brushing it off to the side and moving on. And with my feedback, it was very troubling mentally. Like it was like, should I do it? Should I not do it? Now I regret not doing it, but it was for the better. I feel good about what I did. It was a lot of conflict internally because my feedback, you had brought it up in the intro or somewhere around the beginning of the podcast, that it was a unanimous decision, and my scorecard was all ones. And when I sat down next to Sandy, I was in line behind a couple other girls, and I sat down next to her at the end of the night, and I said, this is my number. I was this class, and I just wanted to know what my feedback is. Where can I improve? And she's like, oh, I know who you are. And I was like, okay. But what can I do? Like, what more can I give? Where do I need to change? And she said, absolutely nothing. Show up on a pro stage exactly as you are. And I was just overwhelmed with, holy crap, she just said this to me. Like, this is real. Like, pinch me, somebody pinch me. And so to hear that and decide not to do a show the next weekend, it was like, that would have been my opportunity. And Emily, I think, I don't know how her last name is pronounced. Plager. Okay. She had competed at Nationals with me. I never got to actually have an interaction with her backstage or anything, but she won her class and she won that show. So I was like, that would have been a great opportunity for me to go on stage. But I was like, you know what, with everything personally that I would have had to shuffle and arrange and incur all this more stress on me, I don't think it would have been my time. I just need to sit with what I feel right now. And congrats, Emily. Like, she looked awesome. That was amazing to win your pro card and earn your Olympia qualification. Like, holy
That was
crap.
awesome. She
Um,
was just on the show. I mean, we're recording. I just interviewed her. Like
oh,
this is
really?
February. Yeah, like it's so crazy. Like we're in February and I'm recording this for like yours is going to be the 1st of April, but like I
Okay.
just had her on for March 19th episode, so I'm mentioning that for listeners to know. Like it's actually really cool hearing you bring that up.
Yeah. Yeah. So, like, before that was the thing too. I didn't want to incur all that stress on me because prior to nationals, like, I was so relaxed during peak week. Like, I had a lot of things going on. I was sharing a car. We had just moved. We had just gotten the puppy. Like, there was a lot of things going on. My dad had moved. Um, and that was hard on me. But the week of the show, even though I was going through all this like personal stuff, and on Wednesday before the show, my makeup, the girl who was going to do my makeup, she canceled, and I had to find someone else to do my makeup. Like, despite all that, when that situation came about and the way I handled it, um, with such a calm nature, and I was like, okay, I'll solve this problem. It's gonna be fine. I know people who can help me. Um, it's not the end of the world. I'm not gonna have a meltdown. I'm not gonna let this situation stress me out. Like, when I was aware of how I handled that, I was like, I have never been so calm. I have never been so confident in my calmness.
Mm.
And amongst the chaos, I was so settled and so relaxed that when we got to the hotel room in Orlando, I put my bags down, I laid on the bed, and I just cried because
Mm.
I was like, I feel this to my core. Like, I've never been so relaxed at a show. I've never been so calm. I have never felt this feeling of being so relaxed. And I just took that as a sign. Of course, you never know what's going to happen, but throughout the whole weekend, like, it was so relaxing, so calm, so casual, no nervousness, no jitters. I mean, barely even butterflies in my stomach at one point. I was just ready to do it and excited to be there. And again, just aware of my time in the moment and absorbing it all and soaking it all in. I was not stressed whatsoever. And being aware of that lack of stress, I was like, oh my God, like, it's happening.
Totally.
So I didn't want to put myself in a stressful situation for my pro debut because I didn't want to, I want to have the moment for myself to decide when that time is, when I know that, the stars, I mean, of course, you're never going to be ready. You have to just jump in. But at the same time, I want to be able to make that decision in confidence that, that I'm ready to do what I'm setting out to do and not just rushing through it because, I want to take this journey for all that it is and soak it all in and not just, it's not a race. At the end of the day, it's not a race. So, I will make that choice when the stars have aligned and presented themselves to me because I really trust my timing, and because I know in my heart that what is meant for me will come to me when I am ready to receive it, and to just follow my heart and listen to my gut on the way there because neither of them will steer me wrong. So just to trust my timing, be patient, and to enjoy the process for everything it is are the biggest things for me.
Wow, I mean, even just that right there is amazing insight and advice for many of us. And it seems like a consistent theme for you, aside from trusting your timing and accepting and even respecting the process and having patience. It's also really capitalizing on your time and on your energy and how you're spending and investing it and making sure nothing is coming from like that urgency. And it's more so coming from like, a real calm centered place knowing that it is the best decision you could make. And I
Mhm.
appreciate you sharing, your feedback as well, because I can imagine if a judge said that to me, I'd be like maybe feeling okay, well, how do I not change anything then, like
Yeah. And
what
it
am I
made
supposed
it want to keep going too.
Okay, so that's what I was curious. Like, if your response was, okay, what, like, how did you approach training after that? Because if they're like, okay, they want me to be the exact same, then were you concerned about putting on more muscle or losing muscle or anything like that?
So after the show, I pretty much, I kept all my training the same. And honestly, my training hadn't improved a whole lot because of this funk I was in. Like I said, due to my hormonal issues and mostly my vitamin D, I was working really hard between work and trying to juggle my job and my clients and my schoolwork and my home life and all my responsibilities, pulling me in different directions, plus being hormonally not in the most ideal situation. My training kind of took a stall, I want to say. Like, it was hard for me to want to train because of the mental funk I was in a little bit. It was hard for me to be as progressive. Because like I said, like I had the show to balance out, I had the win to balance out everything I was dealing with emotionally during my prep. And then after the win, kind of like that moment, that fleeting moment kind of went away. I'm left to sit with all these feelings, and I just felt, like I said, a little bit purposeless for some time. Um, and my training, like my squats, for example, went absolutely nowhere, like
Mhm.
stayed the same. And it was turning into, okay, well, I'm frustrated because I'm not strong. Um, and during that time, to get to that place of homeostasis, I wasn't using any PEDs. So my body's changing. I'm looking more and more less of like the athlete who won her pro card and more like average girl who works out. So I'm like hard on myself with my physical appearance. My training progress isn't linear. So that's frustrating that I'm not looking forward to my squats because they make me mad because they don't feel as strong. And then my workout, the rest of my workout has this like negative cloud over it because I'm just in this irritable, frustrated frame of mind because I don't feel as if I'm making progress. So then I feel as if my workout was a loss. So I was actually experiencing that for the last few months. And then well, the last few months after the show, like January, like December, January time, I was experiencing these feelings. And since I've had my labs done and we're working on those, we had those about a month ago. I'm on the mend now and I'm much better. And then I was sick with COVID for the last 2 weeks. Yesterday was my first day back at work, I was telling you.
I see.
So that break honestly was so much needed physically because I was sick, obviously, but I think mentally, I've never been forced to slow down like that. And
Yeah.
I mean, I seriously think there's a purpose for everything, and not that I'm glad I got sick or anything, but I needed to have that time to again just sit with my feelings and rest and reset. And I trained yesterday and I was, anxious. I was like, am I going to be short of breath? Am I going to feel okay? Am I going to be super weak? But I got into the gym and I started training. And first of all, I had never looked forward to training that much in so long. Um, and I felt great and it felt really good. And I trained for like an hour and a half yesterday just because it felt so good to be back. And I had like those post workout endorphins for the first time in forever, that I can remember, after I trained yesterday. And um, I mean, do would I have rather not gotten sick? Yeah, but at the same time, nothing else would have forced me to slow down. So I'm really fortunate actually that this all happened in the timing that it did, because I don't think I would have gotten myself out of that little rut I was in had I not taken the time to step back, reset, analyze, and move forward. Because these challenges that I'm being faced with of feeling a little bit purposeless, not as confident, things like that, those are all obstacles that I'm being presented with to overcome. And if I don't overcome those obstacles, they're going to keep repeating themselves. on me. And having that time to recover physically was just as important and needed mentally for me to come back and attack the weights again and wake up feeling excited again. And like, I'm not depressed or anything, or I wasn't, but like, I'm okay. But I just felt really off for a long time. And because I'm normally so uppity and bubbly and warm and friendly, and I knew that wasn't like me. So that was even more of a reason why, like, I hold myself to the standard, and who I wasn't meeting that standard. So it was like this tumbleweed effect of beating myself up and then feeling bad and then not performing and then beating myself up about that. And like, that was a very long-winded answer to your question of how my training has changed. But just to be real, in the last 2 months, like, that's how it's been going. And now moving forward, with this training style in mind, and, if my feedback was to stay the same, what am I going to do? I think maybe what's going to happen is what I did is what has worked, and I'm going to keep doing what's working until it doesn't work anymore. And obviously we'll notice if, I'm outgrowing the division, which I think is going to take me a long time to get there. And like, people have messaged me, oh, you should do wellness. And I'm like, no, I'm really not that big of a person in person. I just have larger glutes in comparison to the rest of my leg. And it, like, in a photo, looks a lot different than it does in person. Like, when I'm in shape for shows, I'm very small and very narrow and skinny looking. Like, I don't look a super muscular person. But I'm just going to keep doing what has worked until it doesn't work anymore.
I love that. I think that's awesome. And again, I don't mind the tangents at all. I think they're really insightful, and I like to listen because you offer so much value. And there's been tons of advice sprinkled throughout this episode, but I got to ask you what your best advice is for a girl who's never competed before but's thinking about it, and then your best advice for someone on their road to pro.
Okay, so for someone who has never competed before, but they are thinking about doing a show, make sure that you are signing up for the process rather than just the end goal and the destination, because I really think that it's in the process and in the journey where you are going to learn the most valuable of lessons and grow the most mentally, physically, emotionally as a person. There was so much out of my first contest prep that I learned about myself that I was able to further develop if it was a skill in myself. And so much that I learned in that process that I knew that I caught the bug before I got on stage, because I knew that I enjoyed it so much for everything that it encompassed, not just the show day, if that makes sense.
Totally.
And also making sure that you have given yourself enough time to build a foundation before getting on stage. The first step isn't dieting for the show and going into a caloric deficit. The first step is building that foundation and being a performer and an effective one of that in the gym, with your training, with your adherence and your consistency and your execution before you even think of doing a show. Make sure you have a great coach who you trust, who you can go to with any questions you have. I see a lot of first-time competitors who have coaches. They're asking other people a lot of questions and they seem a little uncertain. And, you should be able to go to your coach with these concerns and these questions. And you should just have as little variables as possible to worry about, especially for your first show. You want to enjoy it for what it is. And then let's see, the second question was someone trying to earn their pro card, right?
Yes.
Okay. For someone trying to earn their pro card, don't be afraid to take time off and be patient. In 2019, the year I did Junior USA, that was the only show I did that year. Having won my class, I could have, and it was hard seeing the girls who placed second and third to me they both won their pro cards at the shows right after. I believe Abby Ball won her pro card at Junior Nationals. And then I forget the girl who placed third. Oh my gosh, it'll come to me after this podcast. Giovanna Gibbs.
I just talked to her.
Oh, really?
This episode before you. That's crazy.
That's funny. I watched her win her pro card. I believe it was Universe, I think. I don't remember.
Quiz me. I already forgot. I just prep for the episodes and then I enjoy the conversation.
That's funny. But either way, like, it was difficult for me to watch. It was hard for me to sit and be benched and watch these girls win their pro cards and say, what if I did it? I could have done it. That could be me. I coulda, woulda, shoulda, yada, yada, yada. That was irrelevant to me because I trusted my timing and I waited it out. And in being patient, like I said, it's only ever helped me and allowed me to reach that place of homeostasis and make the necessary changes. And that's why I have never done a show where I come in the same. So if you need to make improvements, take the time off to do that. And even more the reason to sign up for the journey rather than the destination, because the journey is where you become the athlete that you are. It's not the wins that determine who you are as an athlete. It's the decisions you make throughout your entire bodybuilding journey, and those decisions in your off season or during your prep, like all of it encompasses being a bodybuilder and enjoying the sport for what it really is. And being able to acknowledge if mentally you are ready to tackle on these shows. And are you doing national show after national show because you are looking for a pro card as your only identification of your self-worth? Or is it something that is part of your journey that you love? And, it's not a mask. It's not a Band-Aid over a bullet hole. Prep isn't a mask for you to ignore the other things in your life that need your attention. What else can I say? Be patient and give yourself time and don't fall to the pressure. Like, even if your feedback is to stay the same and keep going and going, if there's other things you need to address, take care of your real life first, because your real life, if you take away competing, you're still left with your real life. And you need to be in a good place there in order to be successful within the sport, I believe. And just be consistent within your patience and trust your time and don't feel rushed. It's not a race. I'm glad I was able to have as much time as I did as an amateur, and I wasn't racing to get to that finish line of the pro card, because I got to travel, I got to meet so many people, and I got to experience so much and learn so much as an amateur. And I learned so much about the sport too. If I were to had, done a local show and qualified for nationals and done a national show, earned my pro card, like, I wouldn't even have known or understood or valued the worth in that. And I think everything leading up to that win had just built my character and myself as an athlete and had made me that much more ready to receive that end prize of the overall and the pro card, because I had put in the time you want to be the pro athlete before you earn the pro status. So what would the professional do? Would the professional keep doing show after show, or would they acknowledge they need the time off? I tried my hardest to be as much of a professional and conduct myself in such that way as best as I could before I had the status of the pro card. The status of the pro card to me just was a piece of company to the athlete I already was. And I say that as humbly as possible, but I was just trying to conduct myself as a professional as best I could prior to earning that. And I think that's what made me that much more ready to receive that, is because in 2019, when I had done Journey USA and just barely barely been shy of my pro card then, I wasn't ready to receive it then. I wasn't as consistent of an athlete or as focused at times. Before in the very beginning, I was the athlete who did this for 16, 20 weeks out of the year. And then the rest of the year, I was way more lenient and relaxed. And, I really tried to be the professional before the pro card came, if that makes sense. So just make sure that you are dotting your I's and crossing your T's every day. And again, that doesn't mean perfection is the only answer. It means that no matter what happens, you brush yourself off and you dust yourself off and you keep going and you keep trying and you keep pursuing the goal with persistence and patience, and your whole heart and soul are wanting this as much as mentally you think you might. You are all in this for the right reasons, and that you are just enjoying the journey rather than going through the motions for the end goal. And again, that was a huge tangent, but that would be my advice.
Awesome advice. No, again, I think everything you share is super valuable, and I appreciate you being willing to share all of that with us too, because your journey has been a fantastic representation of many of those lessons through challenges you've faced or opportunities you've had or realizations that have come from it. I think that's made you even value the process more. And I love that you're sharing that with us here. And I want everyone to be able to connect with you if they haven't yet, and even inquire about working with you as a coach too. So how could they do that?
Okay, so to reach me, you can go to my Instagram. It's Nodzilla with two Z's and two L's. That was a nickname I got that just stuck. And, and to inquire about coaching services, to learn more about Camp Jansen, whether you want to become an athlete of mine or pose with me. I do posing coaching as well. You can read about myself and the other Camp Jansen coaches on thecampjansen.com. We have the Camp Jansen Instagram as well. My email is on my Instagram. I always try my best to reply to DMs. You guys can reach me usually on Instagram. We do have a YouTube as well where I've documented some things leading up to nationals. And we're starting to document more things going into my pro debut also. But on Instagram is where you can find me personally, and then to work with me, shoot me a message and I will most likely lead you to the website where we can schedule a phone call and talk. That's usually my preferred method of communication initially, is just getting on the phone and having a conversation and being real with athletes as individuals. But I love chatting with anyone who is just looking for either advice or support or needs a friend. I'm always happy to answer.
Awesome. I'll put all of that in the show notes page. So I'll have links to each of those things that you mentioned. So that everyone listening, that's always on celestial.fit/podcast. Nadia's category will be at the very top if you're listening right away. If you're listening in the future, you'll just scroll down to the category section and you'll click on her name and everything will be there, along with full timestamps of all the different things that we discussed on this episode too, which is really cool. So yeah, and if you're watching on, or I should say maybe listening through YouTube, you can even click the timestamps and it'll take you to certain things that we talked about, which I think is awesome. So to all of you listening, thank you guys so much for your support. Definitely leave a rating if you can. That would be amazing. It definitely helps the growth of the show and getting more amazing athletes listening, as well as future guests onto this show as well. So thank you guys again for tuning in. And Nadia, thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun. I'm so glad we got to talk about all these topics and discuss everything and answer questions from the listeners. It was a ton of fun and I really, really appreciate it. And I really value this. This is awesome.
Me too. It was so much fun for me as well. I loved every minute of it. I definitely it lived up to the hype that I had around it. So I appreciate you bearing all. Seriously, thank you. And I hope that you all have an amazing rest of your day, night, or morning, wherever you are in the world, or you're listening